Okay, welcome back. We're going to continue our discussion of the Second World War with the third lesson in topic 12, which is the Holocaust. This is not a pleasant lesson. But some things that we do need to talk about, things that I do want you to know and understand about this event in the war. Okay. If you remember, we talked about the Nuremberg laws in topic 11, laws that severely restricted the rights of Jews, stripped them of their citizenship in Germany, forbade them from doing certain types of occupations, mixing with non Jewish people. Um, Really was kind of the start of this persecution. And a lot of Jews tried to leave after this. Another event that was very awful was Kristallnacht, where you had this massive coordinated attack on the Jewish community in Germany. Businesses were demolished, synagogues were burned, Jews were attacked. Many Jewish people were rounded up and sent to concentration camps, which are detention centers. These weren't death camps per se, but it was where they took all the people that were suspect, and so Jewish people were rounded up. It is important for you to realize that other people were also sent to these camps. Slavs like Poles and Russians, the Roma, sometimes they're called gypsies, homosexuals, people with physical or mental disabilities, and people that were politically or religiously opposed to the Nazis. For example, Jehovah's Witnesses were rounded up and sent to these camps as well. So it was Jewish people and others as well. So I don't want to take away from the fact that Jews suffered. Um, a lot of people were sent to these camps and were targeted. These were very often places where people were forced to work and different types of jobs for producing mainly war materials. They were subjected to some pretty brutal conditions. And in some cases, like with Dr. Mengele at Auschwitz, they experimented on people medically. Starting in 1941 is where you really have the beginnings of what we think of as the Holocaust, this targeting of Jewish people for extermination. The euphemism that the Germans used was the final solution. And there are several elements that were part of this. The Einstock group and the mobile killing units that they sent out into the Soviet Union as they were invading were mobile places that would um, shoot people. But this was seen as being very ineffective, but that started it. Building camps, detention centers that were specifically to kill people, like Auschwitz. The shower rooms that they sent people into that were, um, actually gas chambers where they would crowd people in after stripping them naked and gassing them to death. And then, of course, they decided rather than burying the bodies, they should burn them to get rid of the evidence. They built crematoria to do this. And even with the crematoria, they still couldn't keep up with the death rate. Um, it's important for you to realize, too, that Jewish people just didn't sit back and let this happen. There's several examples of Jewish people striking back. The Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, 1943 in Poland. It took weeks for the German army to put this resistance down. Uh, Throughout the Soviet Union and in Eastern Europe, you had groups of Jewish fighters, up to 25,000 of them were involved with partisan activities, with fighting against the Germans and people that were collaborating with the Germans. You actually had inmate uprisings, in several of the camps like Sobibor, Treblinka, and Auschwitz, where people had an armed resistance. And a lot of people hid. There's lots of examples of people throughout Europe that hid Jewish people. In some cases, whole nations rose up to do this. Like in Denmark, they basically rescued all of their Jews. In Italy, they hid Jews. And you had different individuals throughout Europe that did this. Two of the main examples of this is Anne Frank, who wrote a very famous diary of her experiences while her family was hiding. And then there's another lesser known woman who, her and her family hid Jews in the city of Haarlem in the Netherlands. Her name was Corrie ten Boom. Um, They arrested her and her family, but they never did find the Jews in their home. The Jews that were hiding there all escaped. So you did have some examples of people that did try to stop this from happening, but unfortunately, most people turned a blind eye to it, largely because people had a lot of anti Semitic feelings. Um, a lot of the Allies knew about what was going on with the Holocaust, but they decided not to take action. They saw, Jewish people as being basically immigrants who may take their jobs, and so they didn't want them there. Another example before the war of Jewish people basically trying to get out of the country, but were basically rejected, was the St. Louis, that almost 1,000 Jews were trying to escape. Cuba, the United States, Canada rejected them, but a lot of countries did take them in. Unfortunately, when the Germans occupied places like Belgium, France, and the Netherlands, many of the Jews that had gotten away from Germany were actually killed when the Germans occupied these places. Um, Even when death camps became a known thing, they usually kept this as classified information. The Allies saw winning the war as more important than stopping these death camps. The United States did take some steps in 1944 to try to address this with the War Refugee Board. Um, they were actually able to get 200,000 Eastern European Jews out of the country, largely through efforts of a Swedish diplomat called Raoul Wallenberg, who actually was able to forge passports and give these people passports saying that they were Swedish citizens, and was able to get them out. So you did have some efforts like this. Eventually, as the Allies began to move into Nazi occupied territory, they were able to start to liberate these death camps, and word basically got out of what was going on. Uh, Auschwitz, for example, was liberated by the Soviets. Another camp called Buchenwald was liberated by the United States, and the British were able to liberate Bergen-Belsen. And these were shocking images. If you go online and Google these places, you can see what the Allied forces saw when they got there. The results of the Holocaust are usually pretty well known, although I'm not going to take that for granted, guys, because there's increasing information that large numbers of people your age don't know about the Holocaust. They have never heard of Auschwitz. You need to know that 6 million Jews were killed. Two-thirds of Europe's Jews were killed. About 6 million other people in these categories we mentioned earlier were also killed. And so, that's not to take away from the Jewish dead. Jews were the main targets here, but other people were targeted also. What's really sad is that the people that survived often had no place to go back to. Very often, they were the only survivors of their whole communities, and in many cases, their non-Jewish neighbors had turned them over, and so many people were reluctant to go back. This is one of the things that really pushed for the creation of the nation of Israel in 1948. It also led to the understanding that genocide is a crime. The word genocide wasn't really coined till right after this. The killing of people to just because they are what they are, because they're Jews, is no longer recognized as something that can be ignored. Genocide is an illegal activity. This is a picture that I wanted to show you of the result of the Nuremberg laws. You see that this lady and this gentleman are forced to wear signs, and I can't read the German, but what I do know is that this woman, who is a Christian Danish woman, had a Jewish boyfriend. And so they're being humiliated on the streets of the city, being made to wear these placards because they're polluting. The young lady in particular is polluting her race by dating this Jew. So you can see that this is the idea of humiliating people. With Kristallnacht, the picture you see of the building on fire, this is the synagogue, a synagogue in, I don't know which city it is, but they targeted synagogues. Here you see with the picture, the bottom part says, "Don't buy from Jews." So Jewish people were definitely singled out. And this is what, it's not really the beginnings of the Holocaust, but you definitely see severe persecution of Jews in this time period. And here you see Holocaust deaths. Notice that most of these pieces of pies deal with Jews, but notice that there are many Soviet prisoners of war who were killed, political people, uh, the disabled, ethnic groups. But you have a significant number of people who were Jewish, and you notice that of all the different other things that are here, it breaks down more as Jews than anything. And this is where I was telling you about Holocaust awareness and Holocaust denial. Notice in the United States, 70% of the people say the Holocaust happened, 21% are doubtful about it. In Europe, you see the numbers are higher. 94 say it happened, 11% didn't. In Eastern Europe, you see the numbers are pretty high, 82%, 24%. But notice when you get to other parts of the world, like for example, in sub-Saharan Africa, only 24% of the people believe that this happened. In the Middle East, only 38%, 63% there say it didn't happen. So you need to know that the Holocaust occurred. You need to know that Jews were targeted. You need to know that 6 million Jews were murdered. 6 million other people were murdered. It changed how we understand what this thing is called genocide. And hopefully it will never happen again. But definitely know this, not so much for the course, but just because that's what aware, decent human beings need to know about. So this concludes the notes for the Holocaust, and I'll be back for the remaining parts of topic 12.